I know I said in a previous video you wouldn't see Grease's Goldtooth much in multiplayer, but strictly because I said that, that now means I have to try and make him work. Today we're going very off meta with the Ogres against Khorne. No Iron Blaster, no Gorgers. Again, instead I've gone with Greases, leading the way with two Man-Eaters with pistols. Got a Butcher of the Great Maw to heal Greases, Gnoblar Trappers, and a couple of regular Gnoblars. Hunter on Stonehorn in reserve. With no abilities, this guy actually costs less than the Harpoon Launcher, Artillery Stonehorn, and also does pick up an anti-large ranged attack. Only 120 range, but still pretty decent. Another Man-Eater pistol, one Man-Eater with Great Weapon for some elite anti-large AP. 3 Iron Guts for some more AP and armor. 3 Ogre Bulls because they're very cost effective. They're one of the few units that can actually trade well into Khorne Flesh Hounds. And then we've got 3 Gnoblars for additional numbers. My opponent here, a new patron of mine, we'll call him Mossy Toes, is playing Khorne. This is our first patron practice session together, and I have to say, I'm quite impressed considering he is not really a multiplayer guy. Previously, did acquit himself quite well, managed to pull a game off me, which I may or may not end up showing you guys. Anyway, in this particular battle, he's coming in with Herald plus Blood Reaper, which I kind of like the combination of these guys. They're relatively cheap and cost-effective. More of an anti-infantry focus, but just overall decent stats means they can trade well into a number of units. Also got a Cultist for some Demon Summons, 1 Shielded Warrior of Khorne, 2 Flesh Hounds, and 2 Chaos Warhounds. Minotaurs with great weapons in reserve. Again, I understand the thought of the anti-large here, although we'll kind of talk about that in comparison to Man-Eaters a bit later. Blood Crushers, dual hand weapons, 2 Halberds, Bloodletters, 2 Shields, and 2 more Flesh Hounds, plus another Warhound. We are on the Eye in the North map, which in my opinion does favor the range factions just a little bit by the layout, but given that Ogre Kingdoms relies a lot on direct line of fire range, not so much, because what's strong about range in this map, you can set up on these cliff edges and kind of fire down into the objective, and Ogres can to a degree as well, but not as efficiently. A lot of the line of sights are blocked for direct line of sight, so you have to be a little bit more crisp with your positioning. But let's take a look here what I can do. Greases does offer a little bit of upside in this matchup. I mean, certainly the magic damage and heavy anti-large AP weapon damage means that he'll hit pretty hard against a lot of demon characters. Only 38 defense, though, does make him pretty squishy. 30 charge is also not too great, and of course, only infantry speed with 55 armor. So a lot of downsides, but that 55 armor and the weakness to missiles to a large degree isn't going to be so much of a factor in this matchup. You can see the Ogre Pistols, Man-Eaters popping their shots as they advance. That is one nice thing. They can fire while advancing. Of course, he's got the Gnoblars moving in. Big old belly Greases, along with the Man-Eaters there on the low ground. They're going to kind of screen through the Hounds. Not that I wouldn't really be scared. I probably should just countercharge these Warhounds right now, but might as well bring in the Gnoblars and everything for support. Yeah, the Flesh Hounds can probably do pretty cost-effective damage to the Man-Eater pistols, but in general, with 42 defense and much better HP, they'll hold up well against assaults from Furies, and Flesh Hounds much better than something like Lead Belchers will, so that's kind of the thinking here. Yeah, no Lead Belchers at all in this army either, so very much kind of off-center, right, for the Ogres, but there you go. The shields do apply, by the way. Unlike the Lead Belchers, the Man-Eater pistols do not count as artillery fire, so they are subject to missile block chance, but oh, here comes the Flesh Hounds. Kind of missing their charge. They charge into Trappers here. Trappers going to unleash their traps, no doubt. Maybe not yet, but here comes the Bulls for a nice rear charge in here. Again, Bulls are one of the few units that can actually trade cost effectively into Flesh Hounds. And they do get a nice rear charge there. I mean, a lot of units will trade well on a rear charge, don't get me wrong. But anyway, over here, we've got Bloodletters moving into combat against the Bulls. Bloodletters will do some pretty good damage. I think these are actually the summoned ones from the Cultist, but they will get pounded out pretty quickly by that cost-effective Ogre damage. Definitely in this matchup for Khorne, I think you want to just spam Halberds as much as you can, but at the same time, Halberd spam is somewhat vulnerable to Iron Blasters, so I kind of get what he was going for here, sort of spreading the value around in these different heroes. The single entity fight so far is going all right. That being said, the fact that the Cultist is soloed away from the other two. He's now isolated and getting pounded by Greases. It's really not great for him. The Cultist wants to try and stick with the other two heroes as much as possible and have them operate in a trio. 3v1, they would definitely be able to beat Greases down, but for the time being, we're just going to advance the Ogres up through the pipe here. Gonna bring in some more Iron Guts, start to develop that heavy armor, since my opponent here, Mossy Toes, does not have too many halberds out yet. I'm not too worried about bringing in the Iron Guts, which will definitely get killed by halberds, but definitely want a critical mass of halberds as well. Here, though, the Blood Reapers are doing a pretty good job. They've been able to rout these bowls off. I'm having to pull back these Man-Eater pistols, so they came in with the support of the Warriors and the Flesh Hounds and whatnot, able to win this engagement. Now pulling away, though, as the Iron Guts come through. And again, 2v1, these characters should be able to beat down Greasus, but Greasus can get an isolated engagement, maybe have the Butcher engage the Lord, the Herald of Khorne there, and Greasus can come over and start bopping the Blood Reaper. That will be a great situation for me, as long as the Butcher can actually survive. It's going to be pretty important there. Not to mention, you can see the Man-Eater pistols teeing off, close range, fire support right to the back of that Herald of Khorne. He's taking significant damage from that shooting. Not to mention, I can also use them to kind of charge in here. I think I actually do charge in on those Warriors of Khorne, but man, look at the damage on that Butcher. I also use the Moss Shard. One-time use item does cause damage to himself, but also gives him additional spell mastery. So I put, I think, a heal on something. Yeah, I put a Troll Guts. You can see it's an additional 0.6% heals per second, which might not seem like much, but on a high health unit like Man-Eaters, that will be a substantial amount of extra healing there. And I think I also gave, yeah, the Bull Gorger for additional weapon damage and armor piercing onto Greasus as he kind of fights in this engagement. That being said, he did turn his attention away from the Blood Reaper ever so briefly. Look at him like pushing himself around with his club. I never noticed that animation. That's kind of hilarious. Him turning around is like just poking the ground with his mace. Pretty good stuff. Anyway, Butcher comes in, shooting and support units also helping to win the fight. The Iron Guts come in. The Khorne Warriors just can't hold up. Regular non-anti-large shielded Khorne Warriors. Still pretty good stats. 40 weapon damage with Frenzy, 40 melee defense, but still not good enough to get through the 90 armor of those Iron Guts. Getting another rear charge there. Their two-handed weapons, their gut plates, their helmets, definitely better equipped than most other Ogre units. Nice kind of anime swinging attack animation there with their two-handed swords. Oh, interesting stuff. Yeah, and then, of course, the Man-Eater pistols, fighting and shooting both quite well. If they're able to use up their ammunition, that should be just fine, but my opponent's positioning here and tactics is pretty good. He manages to sneak this objective number 1 away from me, right? And I am potentially going to backcap him on this objective number 2, but at the same time, the Flesh Hounds might be able to hold back the Man-Eater pistols. Let's kind of keep an eye on this engagement with the center engagement in the background as this plays out. We should be able to see, yeah, Flesh Hounds are trading all right. Those Man-Eaters did get quite a bit of healing, but this is not exactly a cost-effective engagement for them. Some more Hounds rushing over as well in for some support, so that should allow Khorne to, even if they don't win this engagement, it will be pretty cost-effective for them, and they can keep the Man-Eaters, importantly, away and off of the objective. Warhounds do count as infantry, both in terms of bonus versus X and in terms of capture weight, so although they are going to lose models very quickly here, they will actually be able to hold the capture weight down and fully outweigh the Man-Eaters, which, you know, if you would have told me that on the scales, a group of 60 Hounds outweighs, you know, the Man-Eater unit, whatever they have, 16 base, I mean, maybe. We'd actually do some scientific calculations. Maybe someone can sit down and guesstimate that. But anyway, finally the halberds get deployed. They are going to trade pretty well here, but at this point, there's just such a huge critical mass of these Iron Guts. There's 3 units, of Iron Guts, plus the Man-Eater pistols now pulling back to fire in the rear here. So, although the halberds would normally trade very well in this situation, they're just going to get outnumbered so significantly that they can't actually win. The Blood Reaper still fighting. Unfortunately, the Herald of Khorne did go down there, but able to get some Noblar reinforcements to come down with some bulls. The bulls get eaten up by the dogs, but the Noblars are able to come in a second wave and kind of clean things up, recapture this objective, my home objective, so to speak. You can see those Ogres are not particularly happy. Took a lot of HP damage. It's a little bit hard to tell without the Blood DLC what's taken HP damage. A lot of people actually don't know. The bloodier a unit is in Warhammer 2 and 3, and even older Total War games like Rome 2 and so forth, the bloodier a unit model is, the more HP damage they've taken, right? So, yeah, as a sort of a general rule. I think that's how it works. Pretty sure, anyway. But, Nowadays, without the Blood DLC yet, it's a little bit hard, like, to tell if an individual model has taken a lot of HP damage. Anyway, Rhesus certainly has taken a lot of HP damage, but still has plenty of healing cap space left. The Blood Reaper getting chased away by the Butcher as well. Still pretty good. At this point, despite the fact I'm only 500 ahead on victory tickets, we're pretty far ahead on army damage value. My opponent's doing his best to try and still protect his home objective, but this critical mass of Iron Guts right here is pretty dangerous. I mean, the one unit has taken quite a bit of damage, but these other two still quite healthy. In terms of value, they haven't actually punched back that much. It's just the weight of all that armor and armor-piercing damage. It's a lot for Khorne to try and deal with. So, in terms of builds here, I mean, like I said, due to the threat of Iron Blasters, I mean, you can't politely ask your opponent not to bring them in every battle. Even in most tournament rule sets, you're probably at least going to still see one. The mass halberds can be a little bit risky, or taking a big, expensive single entity like Skarbrand will be vulnerable to Ogre Kingdom's shooting, although Skarbrand probably is also very good in this matchup. I kind of understand spreading the value out, I think, and my patron here would probably agree that, you know, keeping the single entities together and trying to isolate and maybe snipe either the Butcher or Rhesus, probably most importantly the Butcher, since he's the one actually doing the healing spells here. He's going to be the priority target to take down, and then it'll be much easier to kill Rhesus once he's gone, right? So, we even discussed as much after the fact of this battle in our little patron practice sessions. At this point, I think my opponent's probably going to throw in the towel here relatively soon. We'll fast forward as I have a very commanding position. Not really a lot of chance for him to get back into it. Mossy Toes here doing his best. Like I said, he's not a multiplayer guy, so all things considered, this is quite impressive, especially the other games in this session, which you guys will probably see a couple of. I don't know if you'll see all the games from this session, but there you go. Yeah, Khorne Warriors move in, and even the shields, I mean, once they get a direct engagement with the Man-Eaters, especially the Man-Eaters not getting their charge bonus off, it actually goes okay for them. But just in general, a lot of armor-piercing damage. I've also got the Man-Eaters' Great Weapons out, which, although my opponent didn't bring in the Great Weapon Minotaurs, they are very similar in a number of ways. Similar weapon strength profile, but the Man-Eaters just have better attack and defense stats. I think the Khorne Minotaurs are way too expensive, to be honest. I think base Beastman Minotaurs are often too expensive, but they pay a lot of extra premium for their armor, and I really just don't see them as really paying for themselves very often. There is a couple matchups where they're good. Like, I think they can be good in this matchup if they're used well, but they have a lot of vulnerabilities. The Khorne Mirror is probably the best matchup for Minotaurs with great weapons, but yeah, the extra melee defense of the Man-Eaters, how much is it actually helping them here? Probably quite a bit, actually. They're not taking much damage, even though it's only extra 6 melee defense over the Iron Guts against an armor-piercing unit like those halberds. It is just better to have the melee defense rather than the armor, of course. But looks like, did my Butcher actually get routed? Yeah, looks like my Butcher actually got routed. My opponent 3-caps me, is 2-caps me, is actually pressuring to 3-cap. If he had a little bit more time, he might have been able to pull it off, but yeah, just that kind of mid to late phase where he got pretty far behind was hard to recover from, given the constraints of the time frame of domination. But regardless, very fun, very well played, fun stuff. Off meta on both sides, I would say, a little bit, but again, I kind of understand what he was going for here, spreading the value of his heroes out. They didn't quite pay for themselves, but they're definitely the right idea, I think. Likewise, for the rest of the build, and I'll just probably bring halberds rather than the shield warriors. Shield warriors don't give you a lot of extra benefit here, and you might as well just have the halberds, even if you don't necessarily spam 5 in your starting army. Same thing like these dual hand weapon warriors, they could be halberds too. And then that would put you at your 5 halberd limit, and then the rest of the army, pretty much I wouldn't change, actually. Maybe a couple shielded warriors just to help, you know, tank and fight some of those non-armored units. Fleshhounds are good in every matchup, and they perform very well here as well. Even the regular Warhounds, actually, to chase Noblars, provide that little bit of extra punch in those kind of mobility fights. So, honestly, I wouldn't change a lot about this build, except cutting for halberds. Yeah, maybe actually you cut the Minotaurs with Khorne and bring a couple halberds in their place, and that will allow you to keep these 2 shields here. And then probably cut the Bloodletter too. There's not a lot of reason to take anti-infantry in this particular matchup. Maybe even the Blood Crushers as well. So just these 3 units I'd probably cut, and then change these for halberds, and what you could bring in their place. There's a number of different things. Furies might not be the worst to try and at least tie down or shut down ranged units. Maybe even a Bloodthirster. I mean, with cutting these 3, you would probably have enough. I'd have to kind of play around with it a little bit and see. But if you could take a Bloodthirster, just in case they have an Iron Blaster, you can bring a Bloodthirster out of reserve to chase it and find it and kill it. It can work as a way to shut it down. It's a little bit risky, of course. You need to make sure you have good supporting elements, but there you go. It's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts. But regardless, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification every time I upload a new video. You'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.